Justin Currie from Del Amitri. It's good to talk to you here at Noise 11. Well, it's going back like 30 years, I think, since I first played that first record on the radio. How do you think we've aged? Do you think we've done okay there, Justin?
You don't look a day over 26, Paul.
And I'll return that compliment too.
I've got a special filter on.
I should have tried that trick. I think you had your first hit in Australia, didn't you? Kiss Us Sing Goodbye made it to number 28 before it made Del Amitri a hit anywhere else in the world.
Oh, I didn't realise Kiss Us Sing Goodbye had been a minor hit in Australia. I knew Nothing Ever Happens was quite a big hit. Yeah, Kiss Us Sing Goodbye was that's probably the highest it got anywhere, because it was sort of scraped into the top 40 in the UK, as I remember. And it's funny because it got played quite a bit on American radio in the summer of 1990. You used to hear it quite in quite a few places. You'd hear it in taxis and in shops and things. But I don't think it troubled the charts particularly.
Yeah, I think it was like until about your fourth album until Scotland caught up with what was happening in the rest of the world for this band.
Well, actually, Scotland caught up in 1990. Because we had a UK hit with Nothing Ever Happens got to number 11 in the UK charts in 1990, and that kind of gave us a lot of exposure in Scotland. So we didn't really have a very big local audience until we were kind of nationally successful in the UK.
Let's jump that ahead 30 years, and it gets us to Fatal Mistakes and a tour. Fatal Mistakes, new music for Del Amitri. It's the first new music in almost 20 years for the band. And, even then, that album came 8 years after you reformed, and that was like 10 years after a gap. So that's like a really big gap in between new music for Del Amitri.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was potting around doing solo records from like 2007 onwards. I made 4 solo records, and then we did as you're saying, we did the reunion tour in 2014, which we really just did because we were offered a lot of money, and we thought, so it'd be stupid not to do this. But we had no idea how much we were going to enjoy it, because we didn't have a record company, we didn't have any pressures. It was just so easy. So that kind of led us to think, oh, this is quite fun. Maybe we should think about doing this every few years. So we did that again in 2018. And by that time we thought, yeah, we should maybe start writing new songs, because otherwise you turn into a bit of a human jukebox, which is okay. But there's something that's just a bit more creatively satisfying if you've got new stuff to play.
Well, you had the documentary as well, You Can't Go Back, and it's called A Film About Fame and Fatal Mistakes. Nice play on words there with the title of the new album. But, like the Fatal Mistakes obviously was something that when you look back at the fame you have made along the way.
Yeah, I mean, the album title more refers to the kind of what's going on in the individual songs. But yeah, I mean, we always say, just in terms of our commercial status, Del Amitri got very lucky, because we were a post-punk band or an indie band who really, we had our sights set on maybe having a song in the indie charts or something. We never expected to be part of the mainstream pop world at all. But then after we toured America in 1986, we came back and started writing very commercial songs for some reason. We're not very sure why. We were either secretly ambitious or these things were just inside us. And at that point we realized, well, maybe we should be in the mainstream, because this is not alternative rock anymore. This is kind of pop music. So it all kind of happened fairly organically. And we had the great fortune of being signed to a record label that treated us like human beings and didn't really try and force us to do anything we were uncomfortable with. So we had the kind of financial security of being in the mainstream and having a wee bit of success, but also we weren't part of that whole fame, madness, tabloid kind of thing at all. So we had the best of both worlds. So we were extremely fortunate. I mean, compared to contemporaries of ours who got kind of, drawn in and spat out by the music industry, we had a really easy time of it.
Yeah, I think there was this ancient philosopher thousands of years ago. So I just want to talk about the Reformation, getting back into the studio here. But this ancient philosopher once said, "Nothing ever happens. The needle returns to the start of the song, and we all sing along like before." I can't remember whoever said that, but a very wise man. Was it like that in the studio?
Kind of. I mean, the weirdest thing for us was when we got back together in 2014 and booked a rehearsal room in London, and we had no idea whether it would work or not. And instantly we sounded like not a bad band. So that was a relief and a revelation to us that after 13 years, we still had a kind of sound and a feel that was uniquely ours, which I think is true of all bands, really, because it's the personalities that make the noise. There's not a kind of master plan. It's really about who's in the room that defines how we sound. And also, I guess we've got a format, 2 guitars, bass and drums and keyboards. It's the basic kind of 5-piece rock format. But I mean, I think the thing for us was that we didn't realize how enjoyable it was, and we didn't realize how much we missed it. Those 13 years that we spent off the road, we had no idea how much we missed touring, and also touring became easier in the zeros and especially the 2010s. There was more money in touring. You could stay in nicer hotels. I mean, there weren't any nice hotels when we were touring in the 80s, so not that you could afford. So the things just became easier.
Yeah, I think like if we go back to 1989 when those first records started getting played on the radio down here, it was an interesting time, wasn't it? Because just a couple of years later, we had this complete change of sound around the world. Suddenly there was Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, had all come along. How did that affect Del Amitri at that point?
Well, we were sort of lucky in the Waking Hours, our second album, our first kind of commercial record, came out in 1989. So it fell between the sort of indie dance wars and acid house and grunge. So what we were doing was just kind of slip between the cracks, which kind of allowed us to get quite a lot of radio play, because we weren't strictly one thing or the other. And we didn't particularly like a lot of the grunge bands, but I mean, I really adored Nirvana. I thought Nirvana were a phenomenal thing, and that was quite a big influence on Twisted, because we kind of got into quite a lot of new American rock in the sort of early 90s, and that definitely influenced how we approached the guitar sounds and things like that.
Well, you got to play Woodstock '94, didn't you?
Unfortunately, yes.
I've just seen the documentary.
Well, that was the one we played, the one before the one that the documentary is about, but we knew exactly why there were riots in the following one, because the way they ran those festivals was utterly appalling. They didn't allow any alcohol on site. They were arresting kids for smoking joints and drinking beer. It was the whole thing was sort of run like some kind of concentration camp for music fans. And also it was so vast that a lot of the people there weren't really there for the music. They were just there as tourists. It was a really strange experience. So we weren't remotely surprised when the following year it all went upside down,
Well, you were only a couple of weeks away as we do this interview from when you start the Australian tour, 15th of Feb in Perth. So I'm gathering you've already got your bags packed.
Not yet, but I've had the anxiety dreams about packing my bags. So yes, I'm on the way.
Just looking at one of the recent set lists that you did late in 2022, opening with When You Were Young from Change Everything and closing with Be My Downfall from Change Everything, a bit of a bookends thing going there. And then, a good chunk of the new album in there. So it's great to see that this band is coming along and saying, hey, yes, we did have hits in the 80s and 90s, but it's 2023 and, we're still an active band recording new music.
Well, we used to be quite wary of playing too many new songs live, but the songs in this album are pretty short. So we ended up doing 4, and then I think now we're doing 6. And it doesn't seem to annoy the audience too much. And there's a few people that go to the toilet and go to the bar, but that's to be expected. So yeah, we're kind of playing more new songs than we expected to play. But we're not missing anything out, I don't think. I don't feel that we're missing anything out. I think we're covering most of what people would expect us to play.
Well, I think the 5 essentials in Australia, Kiss This Thing Goodbye, Stone Cold Sober, Nothing Ever Happens, Always the Last to Know, Be My Downfall, were all absolutely flogged on the radio back in the day.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, to be honest, they've been in every set list that we've done since they came out.
Yeah.
So I can't think of a gig we'd have done where we wouldn't have played all of those songs. Yeah. Apart from Nothing Ever Happens, because we Nothing Ever Happens wasn't known in the States at all. So it wasn't even released as a single. So we would not play Nothing Ever Happens in the States, but everywhere else we always played all of those songs.
Yeah. There's one song on the new album, Musicians and Beer.
Yeah.
Which, like, you're Scottish, I'm Australian. It all sounds pretty close to our hearts.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at your record collection there, so I'm presuming you understand the concept. Yeah, I mean that song was kind of written in the it's a kind of tirade against all forms of fundamentalism, and it just seems to me that one of the most positive forces in the world is a band and some beer. I just think that's an absolute good.
I was quite surprised that Kiss This Thing Goodbye comes so early in the set, because, that was a really big hit here. And, that would be a song worthy of the last song in the show.
Well, I'll take your advice here, because we've got no idea how to structure our set in Australia. So I was actually rehearsing that the other day on my own, and I was thinking maybe we should do this a bit later. I think in 1990, I think we finished on it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Because I'd forgotten that was on the radio in Australia.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing this band finally down in Australia. It's taken decades to get you here, but finally, I'm sure he's got the ticket in the hand. In the meantime, we can go and have a look at You Can't Go Back, the documentary about Del Amitri. So we can get a bit of background on you before you arrive. We'll know more about you than you know about us when you arrive.
Oh dear.
Justin, looking forward to seeing Del Amitri in Australia from the 15th to the 28th. Actually, you've got a bit of a gap, the 23rd in Melbourne, the 28th in Sydney. You're planning a bit of a holiday while you're down here.
No, we're going to New Zealand.
Aha.
We're doing 2 dates in New Zealand and then coming back and doing 1 or 2 dates in Australia and then flying home.
Oh, well,
interesting routing.
Yes, those ones were absent from my list, so that explains it.
Yeah, that does explain it.
See you in a few weeks.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Paul.